morning and welcome to Citizens Bulletin, brought to you by Americans for Prosperity. Know your role as an informed Pennsylvania citizen. I'm Kim Kennedy, and our host this morning is Larissa Gaughan, who is Director of Grassroots Operations for Americans for Prosperity here in Pennsylvania. Larissa, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Kim. Thank you.
You're welcome. Before, Larissa, we jump into our topic of the day, and I know you have a special guest, would you just briefly remind our listeners about what your position is and just a summary of the work of AFP here in Pennsylvania?
Of course. So Americans for Prosperity's vision is that we break down barriers that stand in the way of people realizing their potential. We push for our society to be one of mutual benefit, where people succeed by helping others improve their lives. So that is at the core and at the forefront of our minds before we engage on any particular issue. And we are a 501c4 advocacy organization, and my role is Director of Grassroots Operations. What my position is to oversee all of our grassroots operations in the entire Commonwealth. So any activity that we have going on all the way up in Erie, over in Pittsburgh, up in Scranton, and down in Philadelphia, and in between, I'm there at our events and engaging with grassroots and grass tops folks, engaging them on our issues, and they're helping us with our policy fights within our different priority initiatives or areas where we focus.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. I know today you have Valerio Martinelli from Americans for Prosperity. Valerio, welcome and good morning. Thank you for joining us. Larissa, are you going to share a little bit about his work at Americans for Prosperity, or is he going to tell us directly?
Yes, well, I will have him introduce himself. Valerio, if you just want to tell our listeners sort of how you became involved with Americans for Prosperity and what your title is and what that means.
Yes. Hi, good morning. My name is Valerio Martinelli. I'm a senior policy analyst with Americans for Prosperity. Really, by interest, I work mostly on K-12 education and education policy in general. And the interest in education was sparked by the realization that as you investigate and try to identify which policies can break barriers for families and individuals, you immediately realize that education policy is a huge component of that. So my interest in K-12 policy and education policy was mainly rooted in that realization. If we want to change society and allow every individual to realize his full potential, we have to fundamentally change the way education works and allow families to find more opportunities for their kids. So that's how my involvement in the network was born. And as my job continues here, I continue to analyze legislation and policy and make sure that it connects to this vision.
That's great. And I think this is something that we don't talk about enough. I know that we don't talk about it enough, I think, with our activists and with our community partners, and certainly on this show too. But, you know, our listeners have heard us talking about other priority initiatives that we seem to talk about a lot, like regulatory reform, tax reform, occupational licensure, sort of our traditional work where we break down financial barriers, and, you know, where we fight because the government is taking too much of our money and usually improperly allocating those resources. A lot of our listeners are familiar with our work in those areas and maybe not so much in the educational opportunity portfolio. And that's, we're so lucky to have Valerio as a policy analyst in this area, so we can, you know, realize what legislation is coming out of Harrisburg that impacts families and children in education. So Valerio, would you be able to just walk us through, I know you touched on this very briefly, but what is educational freedom, and if you could break down again why Americans for Prosperity engages on this issue?
Sure. I think you mentioned in your opening statement, it's about breaking barriers to opportunity and breaking barriers so individuals can really reach their full potential. And that's the reason why we're involved in education policy. Fundamentally, we believe that every individual is capable to realize his full potential. And in order to do that, we need to create the right conditions in our institutions so that they can do that. And education is a very big institution, one that permeates many different aspects of our life, and that's primarily why we are involved in education policy with AFP. We want to make sure that we have an education system that allows every student to discover, develop, and apply their own unique talent to find fulfillment and success in their lives.
Right. And we feel that the best people to make decisions for their children's education are the parents. And we look for policies that empower or will empower parents to make those decisions and take that power, just make sure that it's restored to parents to make those decisions. So you touched on why we need educational freedom, that it should be accessible to all children. What does that look like? What does good policy look like for educational freedom?
So I would say if you look at the education landscape today, we have a one-size-fits-all system where we don't have a lot of diversity of solutions and diversity of approaches when it comes to education. We're all familiar with the traditional public school and how it works. The problem with that is that it's a system that it's very much outdated. It was created almost a century ago, where all students are treated in the same way, regardless of their unique talents and aptitudes and interests. And so you really have to consider these factors when looking for the best policies that can move us to another type of situation where every student has the opportunity to find its own strengths and skills. And so among those policies, traditionally we have identified the education savings account as one policy vehicle through which empower families to find the right educational environment for their children. But we really want to see a plurality of solutions in the way education is provided to families so that we can make sure that we have as many instruments as possible to customize education according to the needs of each child and each family.
Absolutely. And can you talk through some of the other alternatives that are available for children for learning? People think, okay, well, they'll just be at a classroom somewhere else. But can you talk about some of the other alternative programs that are available in education?
Yeah, so in terms of that, charter schools are very popular, cyber charter schools, private schools, and for some families, their public school is great. For many other families, it's not. So any option that can give family, any solution that can give families very different options it's great. But yes, charter schools tend to be popular, especially because sometimes they focus on specific programs. So families see value in that, in a school that focuses on a specific area. Private schools are another option for some families, not for all. Usually the people that can afford to send their children to private school, but many people that can't afford, that's not an option for them. So that's the other point that I wanted to make. Right now, we're in a system where the people that can afford it can have choice in choosing their own school. So they can either move near their preferred school or they can pay for private school tuition. And then you have a lot of other people that don't have this choice and they don't have the means to relocate or pay tuition. And that's why we want to make sure that all children have the option to find the school that fits their need, not just the one that can afford it.
Mm-hmm. That's so important. And, you and I were talking before the show about this a little bit, but we were talking about accountability and, why educational opportunity is the ultimate form of school accountability. Could you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. So we think that really the accountability should be to the families. and not to the education agencies, education bureaucracies, because at the end of the day, the parents and the families are the ones that know if a school is a good fit for a student or not. So every time you see parents exercising choice and selecting a school for their children, effectively voting with their feet, that in itself is a form of accountability, and it should be respected.
Right, right. Now, with all of these sort of tenets that we want to have in good educational policy, there does come a time where there are some more restrictive policies and proposed legislation that comes out of Harrisburg, unfortunately. And something that you and I were talking about before is a bill that would really restrict access to education, charter schools, cyber charter schools, and it was House Bill 1897. Would you be able to talk about just the gist of that bill and how that would be harmful for PA's children?
So that's a bill that it would effectively phase out cyber charter schools and shift responsibility to school district for offering cyber education. And the reason why that type of approach might not be the best one to respect what we just mentioned, like the accountability to the parents, is that it's basically asking parents that have left their traditional public school to go back in the school that was not their preferred school. So there is a reason why they have left. There is a reason why they have chosen a different option. So as you try to increase accountability this way, you actually hurt what we think is the ultimate accountability, which is families deciding for their children which school best fits their needs. So that's a little bit what's going on with that bill and why it might not be the great approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we also have some legislation that supports what we're looking for, and that would be House Bill 356, 357, and 358. And our organization has key voted those where we've said, look, this piece of legislation is critically important. We support these bills and we would like to see these move. Currently, they are in committee. They're in the Senate Education Committee, and Chairman Langerholk is the chairman of that Education Committee. But collectively, this package of bills would expand educational opportunity for students by reforming existing laws governing Pennsylvania's charter schools. Would you be able to kind of give some high-level sort of points on why these bills are so important?
Yeah, so I think that when you look at these bills together, they do make it easier for charter schools to operate and for students to attend those schools. And they also kind of level the playing field between charter schools and other schools. So just a reminder, charter schools are public schools, but they are treated differently under some aspects like funding and access to facilities, and the application for charter schools to become a charter school can be complex. These bills, they kind of make it easier for charter schools to function and acquire buildings. And it would also make it easier for charter school students to apply for dual enrollment in higher education institutions as well. So I think they level the playing field that exists between charter students and the other public school students. And all around, I think they increase options for families, and anything that equals the playing field between different types of schools and empowers families and students is good, and we would support it.
Absolutely. And just to go into a little bit more detail on this package of bills, House Bill 357 would create a standard application process for establishing charter schools with the Department of Education. And House Bill 358 would allow charter schools and VOTEC, or vocational technical students, to dual enroll in higher education, which would allow these students to further customize their education. And that's what we want, because education is preparing our young children, our youth, to be better adults, right? Yeah. So, we at Americans for Prosperity, we are just a strong proponent of giving schools the capacity to implement new and effective ways to ensure that students are receiving an education that's tailored around their particular needs, so that these children can go on to be successful adults. We want everyone to realize their full potential, and that is just our network goal. So sure. That is, I'm sorry, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I think you're perfectly right, and I think you're right in how you explained it, that we want to get to a point where you can customize and personalize education as much as you can. So this is why it's so important to have educational opportunity in the form of different schools and different ways of learning, and schools that specialize on particular areas. That is so important to customize education, because the world of today requires that type of thinking. How you can customize education so that you can develop specific skills that you're going to need in your life, as opposed to the one-size-fits-all approach that by far and large is failing many students.
Absolutely. And, there are, if you're listening to this program and these issues are something that, they're impacting your family or someone maybe a child or it's your child is struggling in the public school system, and you just need to have an alternative so that your child can be more successful. You might be thinking, I'm just one person. How can my voice be heard? And that's what we are here for, because we are one of the largest grassroots organizations in the country, and we can help you with a voice. So there are many different opportunities that you have to get engaged on this issue and any number of other issues in our portfolio of priority initiatives. But for education, if this is an issue that is important to you, please reach out to us. Again, my name is Larissa Gaughan. We have a staff. We have Emily Green, who's in Pittsburgh. We have Zig Reichenbach, who is up in the Cottersport area. We have Linwood Holland, who is in the Philadelphia area. And you can reach out to us at any time. What we urge you to do is contact Chairman Langerholk, Senate Chairman, and you can, of the Education Committee, and tell him that you want House Bills 356, 357, and 358 to come out of committee. We would love to see movement on these bills, so we can have a better application process for establishing charter schools that will reach more students in Pennsylvania. You can also come to an event that we have around this issue. We would be happy to accompany you to the state capitol, where we can contact your legislator, do an office visit with your legislator with you, and you can tell your story, why this is important to you, why this is important to a child, your child, or a child in your life. There are just many different opportunities to engage here. We also have an I Volunteer petition available on our website. So you can go to www.americansforprosperity.org and you can take action. And we have an educational opportunity petition that you can sign, and you can put all of your information in, your email address, your zip code, so that your petition will go to your legislator, and you can say, this is important to me and I want you to act on this.
Excellent, Larissa. Great report. I am grateful that Valerio took time out of his busy schedule to update on the school choice situation in Harrisburg, and I know that you both, Larissa, both you and he, would encourage listeners to get involved in the process. One of the ways they can do that, Larissa, if you would remind our listeners that, this isn't just one and done, that the website, Americans for Prosperity Pennsylvania, gives periodic updates. Can you tell them that web address and also how they can receive updates via email?
Of course. So they can go to our website at americansforprosperity.org, and then they can select Pennsylvania as their state, so they get state-specific information. And we also have a Facebook page. We are very active on social media, and that's Americans for Prosperity Pennsylvania. We post updates there daily, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day if there's a lot going on. And people can message us directly on the Facebook page. They can also like and share our posts. So you can share a post to a group that you're in. Maybe you're in a parent group or a school group, and you can add that to your network. You can also comment on our posts, and you can ask for more information. Say, hey, this issue is important to me. Please contact me, and we will reach out to you.
Excellent. Thanks again to you both, Larissa and Valerio. Enjoyed the conversation. Listeners, you've been tuned in to Citizens Bulletin, a weekly report that's heard every Monday at 8 o'clock. So please remember to tune in next week at the same time. We wish that you have an excellent day, and thank you for being with us.